Hi, my name is Matt Kosterman. I'm a 56-year-old white guy living in Chicago, Illinois. For the first 50 plus years of my life, I didn't think I was allowed to be here. Not just here in Chicago, but here, on Earth, in a body. I suffered from depression for most of my life. I smoked my first joint at age 11 and had my first drink of Southern Comfort straight from the bottle at age 13. While the cannabis never really took hold as an addiction, I drank alcohol for the next 20 years, many times to excess. In 1998, I began psychotherapy, and in the year 2000, I started on antidepressants. I spent 12 years on them and 15 years in traditional talk therapy. Meanwhile, I built a successful business, became a father to 2 amazing girls, and rehabbed an old house in a nice suburb. I did all the things. In 2010, I went through divorce, foreclosure, and bankruptcy. Fun times. After much flailing about, I got my head on straight in 2015, only to begin experiencing severe chronic pelvic pain along with fibromyalgia. I spent nearly 3 years in the Western medical system trying desperately to heal. In 2018, out of money and out of patience, my healing journey really kicked into gear after my first magic mushroom trip. The years since have been an amazing and challenging ride. I've traversed the physical and not so physical worlds and been fortunate to work with many, many talented healers. As a result of all my efforts, I now find myself in a place of receiving, contentment, and prosperity, the likes of which had eluded me for most of my life. There's a man named Daryl Anka who channels a being called Bashar. Bashar describes the process of engaging with a healer, that of giving yourself what is essentially a permission slip to move towards wholeness, healing, and right relationship. This podcast is an effort to share some of what I've learned and introduce you to some of the people and ways that literally gave me what feels like my permission slip for existence. It's also an effort to continue to spread the word that the traditional Western medical system, while effective for a great many things, is not necessarily the be-all end-all solution to every health problem, especially when the problem may be more spiritual than it is physical, as it was in my case. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy it. Please like, subscribe, and do all the social media things that help spread the word. Share these links with people directly in your community. It is my sincere hope that you and others will benefit from my experiences. I'm here today with Renee LaVallee McKenna, who is a trained psychotherapist, yes, but doesn't practice as one per se. We've worked together for, I just looked, the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Goes quickly. And I'm inviting guests on the show who have helped me in my journey to higher consciousness, to right relationship, whatever you want to call it, over the last several years. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Renee, just to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So, my passion and now my life work is to help other people to have the same healing and transformation that I've experienced in my own life. And there's a bunch of modalities gathered together that I call spiritual psychology, which is my work, which is how we connected through my mentorship program and as a client. And excuse me. I came to this work. I like to say I did enough therapy that I eventually just became a therapist. Um, my history is anxiety, depression, fear, and a huge range of addictions and dysfunctions early in my life. So I was pretty much a train wreck, certainly on the inside. I mean, the outside at different times looked okay. Depends what time frame you're looking at. But is back as early as I can remember. I was filled with anxiety and this kind of just existential dread and insecurity about the world. And that fueled lots of different addictions, trying to medicate those feelings of existential angst, drugs and alcohol, boys and food, sex, drugs, rock and roll, that whole kind of street corner kid lifestyle, petty criminal. I really went into the dark side kind of deeply, which actually I found can be a portal. There's a back door that leads you back into the light. So when I was, I've had lots of different, what I would call it, bottoms in my life that led to different transformations, but the big one was when I was 23 years old and got sober from drugs and alcohol. And that really started a spiritual quest for me when I realized I really thought there was a right algorithm of like lose the right amount of weight, get the right job, find the right guy, find the right combination of cocaine and vodka that like I wouldn't black out and throw up. And, I thought there really was an algorithm and there wasn't. And that it was really at its essence a spiritual issue, an internal issue with my own unresolved emotional issues and my own really emotional and psychological underdevelopment. And so that's been the path of seeking and experiencing and finding these, a lot of them rooted in ancient traditions of wisdom of how to live as a healthy, productive, fulfilled, joyful human being. And so that's what I've spent the last 37 years doing, since
But
I
who's
was
counting?
23. Right. Yeah.
So you talked about getting sober at age 23. What was the catalyst? What was the impetus for that? What finally tipped it?
So it was actually what I would call a grace of God experience. If you didn't use drugs and alcohol, I didn't want anything to do with you. We had nothing in common. I was a barroom drinker. I was a wild party girl. And I was my life was actually saved by this woman who was working in this job that I was in, who had been watching me like wear the same clothes the next day on Friday that I had on Thursday, and see me coming in on Monday when I couldn't find my car. And she just watched me be a wreck and try to hold it together and observed it from her own life. And she said to me, "I think you might be a drug addict and an alcoholic." And I was like, "What?" Like no one ever we didn't talk about stuff like that in the bar room I was drinking in. So she piqued my curiosity and told me her own story. And that was my entrance into 12-step recovery, which has been a lifelong progression. And simultaneously, I needed to be in really doing a lot of inner work and therapy and deeper spiritual practices, which has been the expansion of all that. But it started with when the bleeding stopped, with me realizing basically that drugs and alcohol was a lie. Like I really believed that there was a right algorithm. And I was introduced to this idea that, like, no, that's actually all a lie. It's not going to bring you where you want to go. And it's actually stopping those things that you think are holding you together, which seems completely counterintuitive and even terrifying without a lot of support. That there's actually much more deeper, grounded, trustworthy um, ways to live. Because that was a whole lifestyle, drugs and alcohol and boys, and, it was all um, and I needed to change, and I didn't know how to change. Up to that point, change for me was, stopping the Atkins diet and doing some other diet. It was stopping drinking vodka and trying wine coolers. It was breaking up with my married boyfriend and dating some other guy who only had a girlfriend. That was change for me. It was lateral. Like sometimes they call that switching seats on the Titanic. It's all going down, right? So this was how to actually change, that I could be different, that I could not only behave different, but feel different, think different, relate with people in a different way, that I could actually grow and heal and change. And that was a revelation to me. I really didn't know what I know now of the depth and breadth of healing and change that's possible. In fact, I probably don't know what's possible, but I know more than I did then.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So was it, were you done? Were you done when you started 12 step? Was it over with the drinking? Did
It
you?
was. It was a
Yeah.
radical. I went from like facing this direction.
Yeah.
I heard the truth, and the truth was that the outside, I was trying to fix the outside to fix the inside, and it wasn't working. That was obvious. And when I got told, "Oh, you can fix the inside and the outside will change," which is an ancient truth spoken in many, many different ways, right?
For sure.
I mean, in the Gnostic Gospels, in the Gospel of Thomas, it's quoted as saying, "What is within you, if you bring it out, it will save you.
Hmm.
And what is within you, if you do not bring it out, it will destroy you." Which is a different, and so, but
Hmm.
I didn't know how to look inside. I mean, now I understand that life can be a hero's journey and that we are the metaphor of that hero's quest, that the dragon is actually our own unresolved emotional issues, that the jewels that the dragon hoards in the cave are actually our own higher self, and the best things that we're here to bring for the benefit of the village, and that we're also the hero that needs to go into the dragon's lair and face either calm, or depends if you're an Eastern or a Western person. In the West, we kill the dragon. In the East, they make friends with the dragon
Friends with the
and
dragon.
have
Yeah.
the dragon actually in service of you. Um, and so, and as heroes or heroines, we get a lot, heroes and heroines in the ancient traditions get a lot of spiritual help. Athena might bring you some stuff, or the earth beings, or however, ancestral help, spiritual help beyond our ordinary limited rational conscious mind. And the experience for me of that woman coming to me after a 4-day coke run with, you know like, just a lot of craziness happening in my life, um was like the perfect person at the perfect moment to tell me the perfect thing. And I realized, I don't know if I realized it at that moment, but certainly it wasn't too long looking back that I realized that I had always believed that there was some universal force or a God or whatever, but I didn't think it cared about me. And
Hmm.
that there
Hmm.
was actually a personal thing paying attention to me, that I felt like sent this woman, like it was just this weird thing, and it was actually beneficial to her to help me. And it was a whole like kind of like, I think, what happens for some people when they get cancer and they get miraculously healed from it, or some, it was a real spiritual experience. um it didn't feel that dramatic at the time, but I look back, and my life had been going in this direction, really looking for that algorithm. And then it was like, and then was completely turned. And I haven't been clean and sober since that day, but I have never really turned back, because, you know, I'm a pretty no. Can I swear on this?
Of course you can. It's my
Okay, I'm
podcast.
kind of a no bullshit person, and so I really like, um, I like shortcuts. I'm like, show me the money. I want to know what's real, right? And it was like my very first interactions with spiritual principles, with people that were actually being deeply honest and doing this hero's journey of trying to really heal themselves, of incredible courage to face their unresolved stuff, to take self responsibility, to move forward, to be of benefit to other people. Like, all that stuff felt really good. Like,
Yeah.
it was just a body felt feeling. Whereas, like, do another line of coke, honey, let's get a hotel room. Like, that didn't feel so good.
Right.
I mean, it felt good in the moment, but like the next day it didn't. And
Yeah.
this had, I mean, it is, by, I'll quote, not that I'm a biblical person, but there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Hmm.
By their fruits ye shall know them. Like, how does it feel in your body?
Right.
And that's what I tell people in the spiritual psychology work. Like, I'm not here to sell anything to you. I'm here to offer these things. If they feel like they're helpful to you, then there's a ton of tools and, work that we can do, and you can do on your own, or we can do together, to help yourself grow and heal. And not just my work, of course, there's infinite work, right? But it depends on, it isn't about buying something someone's selling you. It's, how does it feel? That's the
Yeah.
ultimate template.
How does it feel in your body, and how does it land? And that's been my journey as well. But it was interesting because I was so disconnected from my body that I had no idea how anything felt in my body. So it's, and
Mm,
I found you after quite a lot of psychedelic medicine work and body work and whatnot. I don't know that I, I could have gotten where I've gotten. Everything happens in the order that it happens, of course. And so, uh, what you're saying is also my lived experience of my work with you, is that, especially, I mean, just the origin story of this podcast. We were on the phone, we had a session a week or two ago, and you suggested that I start this podcast. And as you suggested that, I started to get tingles throughout my body, and you encouraged me to feel into it, and I did, and it became almost overwhelming, an affirmation that this was something that I needed to do. I don't know where it's going to go. I have no idea. All I know is that I'm taking the step and doing it, because I felt it in my body. It's been an idea in my head for a long time, some way to bring forward all of these things that I've been so blessed, these different
Mhm.
modalities I've been so blessed to experience. But this was in my body. There was absolutely no denying it.
Well, it's an interesting thing because that's the jewels, right?
Yeah,
There's these things that we don't even necessarily know, although they're usually not a shock that like
right.
we might be good at, that might be beneficial to others. Because for me, I mean, that's the real wisdom of it, completely understanding the whole hero's journey is that, the hero, there's some kind of a problem, usually some kind of a monster, and then we have to solve the problem or else everybody's going to get killed in the village, right?
Sometimes more than one monster.
There's often more than one monster, right? And so we need to face that. Somebody, the hero, has to be willing to face the monster in order to, bring peace back to the village. But there's usually some kind of a treasure that the monster is hoarding. And I mean, we can look at Lord of the Rings, we can look at, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
Star Wars, Joseph
Star Wars.
Campbell.
Yeah, those the really the epic, and then there's of course the ancient ones, right? And so, understanding that the jewels aren't just for us and that we don't take these quests by ourselves, and so it's so beautiful, like it's through our own healing work, and we have a very similar story, and I think this is true for most people. Through our own healing work, and we can see how our experience can benefit others, and that brings it into a full circle beyond just myself feeling better, and there's this whole other level that happens when I can start to share what I've experienced with other people. Now, you don't have to be a practitioner and you don't have to have a podcast to do that. You can do it with your friends. We do it together. And it's through an interaction that this came, just like that's always happened for me. Self help work can only bring us so far, and then we need to work with other people.
Yeah, I mean, what's really become clear to me in the last year and a half is how much we heal in community, because of so much of my journey has been on my own, doing my own deep work, and that's all great. But and I shouldn't say all. I went through the whole landmark curriculum and um, some other the meadows, but then, like you said, you have to bring it into the world. And even through, I started writing a couple of years ago, sort of a journaling of my past. I got to a certain point, I got stuck. Still going to work past that, but even through that, I know that there was a friend of mine who came to realize that he had a drinking problem, and by just reading that, and somebody else, I think it's so interesting. And I suffered from this as well. I thought, first of all, I thought everything in my life was the way everybody else's was, that it was totally like normal and fine,
Mhm.
sort of like the algorithm. But like, if I just make a little bit more money or get a little bit nicer house or whatever. But then when you start to bring these things out into the world, people are like, oh, you mean it's not perfect? I mean,
Fine.
yeah,
There's a really I have to insert this. So there's a little, I forget what they're called. It's not an anagram for fine, which is the word, the letters stand for something.
acronym. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, an acronym. Thank you. Fine stands for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
yeah, yeah,
And most people are fine, and that
absolutely.
might be normal, but it's not what's possible.
Totally. Yeah. And the perfection is actually, it really, it all is perfect. It's just not the perfect that people think the movies would make it, that you've got, I had this perfect life in the suburbs with two children and two cars and my own business. and I made a ton of money, and I was miserable,
Right. Many of us,
absolutely miserable.
I call that being a prisoner of a privileged life.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I've had that experience later in my journey as well. That,
yeah,
again, digging down deeper into, I like my favorite poet, David White,
mm,
says that there's a conversational nature of reality. I wish I could do accents because his
I
accent
know.
is
It's
so
it's
great.
it's amazing.
And there's what we want from life, and then there's what life wants from us.
Yeah,
Right. And to open to that. And I like to say that, my soul doesn't give a shit what my ego thinks. Right. It
doesn't care how
really,
big your house
and to
doesn't care how
live
big
on
your
the
house is.
soul level, right?
Yeah,
That's really where the goods,
yeah.
the meat,
That's
the
from What to Remember on Waking, I believe, isn't it? That's the
I don't
CD
know.
tape?
I've heard it many places. So wherever it came, nothing's
Yeah,
original.
yeah. No, I just mean the David, yeah, the David White, the conversational.
I think it was Krista Tippett on Being that I heard him say
Okay,
it, but I'm
okay.
not sure where. Um, anyway, I
Yeah.
love him.
So tell me more about, so you got to this similar place. You'd gotten clean and sober, and things were going along, but then you just mentioned that you got to this place where maybe got a little too enamored with materialism, or what was the next sort of stage?
Well, so that wasn't the next stage. That was a later stage, if you wanted in stages. So I continued to be really dysfunctional. I mean, I wasn't drinking and drugging anymore. I wasn't abusing myself with food, but my relationship life was a wreck. I'm
Mhm.
codependent. I had sex and love addiction. Whatever you want to call it, like co-addiction. Um, and so I married this really handsome, very charming pathological liar. So that was interesting. And ended in divorce and bankruptcy court, and me really needing to go deeper. A whole bunch of things kind of fell apart when I was in my late 20s. My father married a kind of a crazy person, and our relationship fell apart, and a lot of everybody started to fall apart around me, and I I was suffering again, and I didn't want, drugs and alcohol wasn't a solution. It was when I discovered meditation, and I discovered, because I was desperate, like I'll try anything, and I, again, still like trying to fix the outside to fix the inside, and the direction was to go in and
Yeah,
to find peace within and first. And so I discovered Thich Nhat Hanh. I discovered meditation, and or was dragged to meditation, we could say, because I did kind of take, I would almost call it a vow that I don't ever want to do drugs and alcohol again. So I've never taken psych meds. I've never taken anything that's mood or mind altering since I was 24 years old.
mm,
And because just for myself, there's nothing wrong with it. I have tons of friends on psych meds, and I work with people that use, but just for myself, I believe that there's a natural way that just feels like that's and that whatever the dis-ease is that I have, I'm very interested. Now, I just had a knee replacement. I mean, I believe in modern medicine. I'm not, I eat meat.
yeah.
Everything's not organic, but anyway, that's me.
And when you say
So
psych, you're talking psychotropics and psychedelics, both.
any of it. I've
Yeah.
just and I've made that question to myself over and over again, and my question to my own deeper self about also myself as, and particularly now as a teacher.
Mhm.
What's my role? And there's plenty of people. I mean, I had a big conversation with myself and my business partner about whether or not we should include psychedelics in this secondary organization we have called Open Door Growth, and and decided there's enough people doing that. And
Mhm.
really, for myself, and it is the truth of my own path, that any way you can get with the drugs, you can get without the drugs. And so I feel like that's my work, is to offer
Mhm.
that to people. We all put in a couple pennies into the fountain, and those are my pennies. So the work, my personal growth work has continued to expand into different areas of my life, where there's suffering. And wherever people are suffering, that's where they need to do their work first. when I first got sober, I went I went to a food addicts meeting. I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I went to a meeting for drinking, and then I said to the lady who had happened to be a street prostitute for a long time, and I had been thinking about sex work because I wasn't too good at holding the 9 to 5 anymore with my drinking. And I said to her, "Is there like some sex thing that you could do?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. All that in good time. Pick the one that will kill you first." Like
Mm,
you said,
mm,
there's an
mm,
order of
mm.
operations for
Yeah.
each of us of healing. Just like when we cut ourselves, a deep cut, like there's all these stages of what happens, for the healing to come to completion. And they happen in an order. Your skin doesn't start to reform itself until the inner muscles and tissues
Right.
and the capillaries are reconnected. Anyway, we don't need to
There
go into
there's there's an there's an intelligence at work.
is a deep
Deep
intelligence, and we
intelligence.
can trust that. And it's kind of some of them are. I mean, there may be some general suggestions, but ultimately, it is kind of individual for each person. So um I came here with a lot of bags and I'm still unpacking, and so it was like, what's the things that are the most, what's the smoking gun, or the actually no, it was like, what's the burning fuse on the bomb
In the
that needs
bomb,
to
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
decompressed first, and then we'll start to deal with the more collateral things. So, first for me, it was really drugs, alcohol, food, the things I was abusing myself with on a daily basis that were numbing me so much that I couldn't actually do any inner work or be effective in the world.
Right, because you were disconnected from your body.
I was so disconnected. I was literally like unconscious or depressed in bed because of
Mhm.
my overeating and bulimia and all that pattern. So all that had to stop first, and then to start to work with some of the more maybe not so subtle things that were like my relationship issues, my attachment to unavailable people, emotionally unavailable at that point.
Mhm.
Now I have emotionally available, but that that was something that was causing incredible suffering in my life. And actually, it's all a big system, and the relationship issues often, led me back to drinking and drugging, and because I had pain, I wanted to medicate. So the next big stage for me was relational recovery and relational healing, and really shifting again, another level of facing myself, and ultimately taking responsibility um, for all the circumstances of my life. That was the next level. Like, whoa, like I was not a victim
Mhm.
of my first husband, although, I could give you a long list of things and you might feel really sad for me about them, but I picked him. There had been other guys who wanted to marry me, right? But I picked that one,
There was
which
a
was
choice.
like, it
There
was
was
a
a
choice.
there
Like,
was a choice.
and that was a revelation to me in a way, to move out of being a victim of these circumstances and to really take self responsibility, and not in a self facing way, but to really ask myself, like, what's that about? Like, why am I picking emotionally unavailable people? And really the simple answer was because I was emotionally unavailable myself.
Yeah,
And when I became willing to become what I wanted to receive, that became kind of the next level of revelation for me, that water does seek its own level. It's when I started to experience or seek out these more, I guess, esoteric traditions and metaphysics and different things in consciousness, of really understanding in a broader way what's happening here as a human and how to be more successful at it, because I wasn't doing a great job of being successful.
at being human.
Lot of failure. A lot of failure. And
Yeah.
failure is underrated. Failure is really good information, lets us know that we're not knocking on the right door. And
It's
so,
all learning.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there was a lot of learning about what I don't want, what I don't want, what I don't want, what I don't want, what doesn't work, what doesn't work, what doesn't work. And which ultimately led, and through a lot of it through the Buddhist practice with Thich Nhat Hanh. I had a really wonderful opportunity in the late 90s to go on a 3-week retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh and all of the monks and nuns from Plum Village at the University of Vermont. Yeah, they wrote a book out of that retreat called Path with a Heart. And to be with the monks and nuns of Plum Village for 3 weeks, and they owned 2 robes, 2 pairs of shoes, and a bowl, and they didn't even have hair. They shaved their hair off, right? And I'm into hair, you ain't
I mean,
taking my hair.
careful,
I
careful.
know, I know, I know. We all have our own things, man. So, and they were happy. I mean,
Yeah,
not all the time, they have their issues or whatever,
should
but they were
happen.
happy. And I was like, wait a minute, they're celibate? What the hell is that about? They have none of the stuff that our culture tells us we need to be happy. They
Right.
didn't have a relationship. They didn't have a house. They didn't have a career. They didn't have beauty. They didn't have stuff.
They had beauty. They didn't have beauty
As
products.
far as like this, they
Yeah.
didn't have fashion. They didn't
Right.
have fancy hair and makeup um and so yeah, that was a real eye opener for me. And I started to really question all these ideas. And I had already had a failed marriage and bankruptcy and blah, 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 all that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I actually came home from that retreat and it wasn't right away. I had to have another failed relationship. But anyway, I'm a slow
Mhm.
learner.
Mhm.
And, uh, and I came home and it was the first time, because I've done it twice now, that I gave away or sold all my stuff. And I
Mm.
moved into a room in somebody's house and I started to meditate every day and just really ask the universe, uh, what do you want from me? I had been telling the universe what I wanted from it, but what do you want from me?
Yeah.
And surrendered in a way I had never surrendered. In the 12 steps, the third step is that we turn our life and our will over to the care of God as we understand God.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was a real, real turning point for me to be willing to let go of my ideas about relationship, about money, about prosperity, about success, and to because I wasn't happy.
Yeah. Yeah, and in your case, you did it somewhat willingly, and I had the experience of doing all that against my will with divorce, foreclosure, and bankruptcy, and down to my clothes and my stereo,
And what happened for you?
and it all turned around,
Mhm.
but not right away.
No,
So
loss and pain are underrated as
yeah,
catalysts for change.
yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't it doesn't have it doesn't have to be that way. As again, the sort of juxtaposition. I've had a medicine path. You you've not. You had I've done some meditation, but you willingly sold off all your things. I've definitely considered it. I was forced into it. So everybody's going to get there in a different way. There's as
Right.
many people as there are. There's many paths as there are people.
But the deeper, and people don't like this,
Right.
but the deeper cycle of change is that in order to have something new, we need to let go of the old.
Yeah.
Now, nothing that's of value won't return to us. Anything we really need will return to us. But my experience over and over is that I often cling to the things that I most need to release.
Yeah. Hmm.
And and it is in total release that I almost look at it like a puzzle that's put together wrong. All the pieces need to be pulled apart in order for it to be put together back in the right way. And it can be an excruciating process. I mean, I think it's actually it is the deepest teaching of the Christian myth, which is the death and rebirth experience. Although there's a whole other, I'm going to share this because I just actually heard, I'm a student of consciousness, and particularly very interested in finding the words that go with this experiential kind of non-rational
Yeah.
realm, which is where most of the actual work happens. And I saw this system recently that was talking about enlightenment or the higher stages of consciousness on this plane. And they said that the Christian um, teaching of consciousness, like the Christ consciousness, teaches enlightenment through martyrdom.
Hmm.
And the Buddhaic system is actually more elevated than that because it teaches that enlightenment without martyrdom,
Yeah. 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 And that's,
with
yeah, that's
service to others.
service to others.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the course that I'm enrolled in now, we had one of the teachers was Jorge Ferrer around comparative mysticism, and we touched into that. Like, is there an ultimate truth? Is there an ultimate reality? The perennialist would have you think that there is, that there's one place that we're all going,
Mhm.
whereas people like Ferrer, the contextualists, say that it's totally diverse. Depends
Mhm.
on what you bring to the table and your life experiences, et cetera. That there's, you get into feminism, and you know, it's a very the perennialists are very, very patriarchal, and it's a man's world, and it's the ultimate father, et cetera. And whereas the contextualists bring in women's voices and indigenous voices, and it's a different experience and a different path for everybody. And
We definitely all have a unique and different path. The truth that does feel like the great or the higher teaching here is that we're all connected,
mhm.
that everything is interconnected. And I think that it is our sense of separation that is the root of most suffering. Again,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
some
Probably
reason,
all.
I'm very biblical today, but like Adam and Eve is the original creation myth of the Western world, or at least of the Abrahamic traditions. And the story of Adam and Eve really is a story of separation from
Source.
that unification, separation from source. Exactly. So, and that is the root of the suffering. How they make sense of it, I think, is a little distorted. But um, so how we experience that, what that means, where we go with that, that is what's unique for each of us. But I think that that is the path to fulfillment and joy and connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love that you introduced in the mentorship, which I was a part of for about a half a year. And I'm gonna at some point throw it up on the screen here, but David Hawkins' work,
Mm,
and because you talked about the algorithm earlier with drugs and alcohol, and that's not really the algorithm that gets you anywhere except down. And
right. Right. That's
and
a destructive algorithm that's suppressing the authentic self. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the map of consciousness of Hawkins is marvelous. And I just love the way that you brought it into the work. To Because again, I love a map as well. It's the map's not the territory, but it's a beautiful metaphor for the journey.
It is. I think it's a really helpful tool. Do you want to throw it up now so we can
Yeah.
talk about it a little bit?
Let me see if I can.
Do you have the pretty colored ones I made, or do you have the David one with all the
I have the
different?
one that you made. I'm not sure.
Either one's fine.
Yeah, no, I have it here. I'm not sure if I have the right settings for Chrome here.
Share.
Let's see what happens. We can always edit.
We're at 37
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, and it wants me to it wants me. I got to quit Chrome and come back in, so that's not going to work
Okay,
right now.
never mind. All right. So you'll have to edit out our little
Yeah, spit out.
blip.
So let's circle back around. Beautiful, beautiful journey, amazing. I can relate to much of it. How you work? We'll skip all the part where you went through a lot of schooling, I assume, between the hard knocks of life and then formal schooling to get a degree as a counselor, as a therapist.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
So on the other side of that,
I want to just
kind
talk
of
about how
letting
you
go.
work. how you work with people and what it looks like for people to engage with you and work together either directly or through your work that you've put out. You have so many resources for people. It's amazing.
Great. Okay. So we can, it's a great little story though. So on the other side of that,
Mhm.
like turning everything over to God, a bunch of serendipity happened, and I realized I had been asking the universe, like, show me my work. I had read The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey, which was a really also a life changing book. And so out of all that, I ended up coming to California. I got accepted to a graduate school that I really loved that doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of sad. It's a sister school to the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. The school I went to was called JFK University. Anyway, it just closed over COVID. Very sad.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
and I went in there actually as a somatic practitioner, and I ended up changing into the transpersonal psychology training program because I just loved it. And to work my way through graduate school, I had been cleaning houses for a long time at the end of like 4 failed businesses, and I just had to make money to pay my rent. And I started cleaning houses, and I found out I loved it. And I came from hoarding people. So cleaning houses had this also opportunity for me to learn how to care for things and be in beautiful spaces. And it was really therapeutic for me internally. And people paid me really good money and was super appreciative. I'd never
Mhm.
felt so appreciated in a job.
Mhm.
So I cleaned houses for over 10 years. And I did it when I came to California, and I was cleaning house for this lady to work my way through graduate school. And she said, I'm a therapist. I'm actually a hypnotherapist. I said, oh, that's interesting. And, so we started to trade work. I would clean her house and she would give me sessions. And she, about a year into that, started a school, which exists today. And she was my teacher. Her name's Dr. Isa Gucciardi. And she has an organization called the Foundation of the Sacred Stream in Berkeley. And we originally met in her basement. but and so I started to train, and like myself, where I am today, she had experienced this work. She became a practitioner, and she eventually passed it on to other people. And so I started this really potent, dynamic work that's a blend of Buddhist philosophy and hypnotherapy and shamanic traditions, um, concurrently with going to graduate school. And so, the unfortunate thing about a lot of psych programs is that they don't, there are some, if they're super directed, tell you how to practice with people. A lot
Mhm.
of them don't. They give
Not very
you a
practical. Yeah, yeah.
range of things, right? And I had these incredibly potent practical tools. And so I was practicing with people while I was still in graduate school. And because it was just this kind of rogue program, I made my own practicum basically. So I saw clients for about a year and a half. I saw people, anybody who would sit with me, I would do work with them out in the lawn and at Starbucks and in my car, and was just doing this incredible work of soul retrieval and connecting with spirit in really direct ways, and negative energy extraction, and things that are just these, again, ancient practices that have been developed for a more modern psyche that are incredibly transformative. And concurrent with that, I was also a client. And so which is how I teach people today, which is that we embody this work. The best is not intellectual knowledge, it's actually experiential. And then you have this body sense of what you can pass on to other people that is inarguable. So through that, I started to see clients and to do this work, which I'm just completely in love with this work. And when you find the things that you love, and I think we all have things we love, whether it's walking dogs or planting flowers or building houses or writing code or this singing, everybody has things that they love, and doing them is our joy. Whether you make money from them or not, I think that in some ways that's secondary. It's optimal if you can, but we're often good at more than one thing. But doing what we love and loving what we do, that is, I think, the best life. And certainly it's the life I live, and I've been living it for a while.
Yeah.
And
Good.
so,
Yeah.
um, So I started to practice, and the practice, I mean, very practically, how spiritual psychology sessions look is we address the intellect, our understanding. We talk about what the issues are, what people's sufferings are, because that's how we conceptualize it, how we communicate it with ourselves and other people. And and through those, we come to an agreement on what it is we're going to work on, because talking about things doesn't necessarily change them. There is a place for talk therapy. I did it a lot. Even being able to talk about, like, you can talk about that. Like, I didn't know you could do that, right? Like, that was like a revelation to me that you could even say that stuff.
The quiet
And
part, you could say it out loud.
yeah, like,
Yeah, yeah.
whoa.
Well,
So that was a shock that I
uh-huh.
could bring what was inside outside, and that could save me, right? But there's only so much that that does. It doesn't actually change. Understanding things don't change it. I like to say it's like expecting my brain to digest my food, or expecting my lungs to pump my blood. Like there's different systems we have that have different functions. They all work together. And so we have our rational self, which is really, really important, but we have our non rational self, not the irrational, the non rational self, which is our emotions, our body felt experience, our kinesthetic or energetic experience, our relationality, which is actually where most of our life experience lies. And it's also where most of our dysfunction and our wounding lies.
Mhm.
So, not that there's not mental dysfunction, but that's actually not what we're talking about. My experience is when you can work and heal, when you water the root of the tree, the whole tree is healthy. When you can get to the root of the problem, which is almost always in the non-rational experience,
Yeah,
then the narratives and the other dysfunctions will unravel themselves over time.
yeah, for sure. That's been my experience in working with you.
So there's talking about it, and then there's actually doing the work, which looks like a guided meditation. I call them inner journeys. It's just, we have so much available to us if we just relax. All the wisdom traditions tell us, they all say the same thing. They all say, stop it.
Right.
They say, be quiet,
Just like Bob Newhart, right? Yeah,
let go. They all say the same thing. And we're all like,
same
no,
thing.
no, there's got to be things
No,
to do. No,
I know, yeah.
when we can just be quiet, and it doesn't even have to it's not complicated. I don't do a lot of woo woo stuff. Like, come into your body, everything you need to know is right there.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then we have these really amazing potent tools, which are found in many, many traditions, that we don't need a shaman or a doctor or someone else to do those for us. We're at a place of our evolution, many of us anyway, where we need to learn to do these things for ourselves. We need to take self responsibility and be able to do them for other people. And so I basically am a navigator of people's own wisdom. I come with the hero. I'm not the hero.
right.
Um, I'm
And
more
and
like
actually,
Jiminy
I
Cricket
just
that tells them where to go.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just gonna pause because that's sort of also the tie into the name of the podcast is the permission slip. There's a man who channels a non-physical entity called Bashar, and he says all of these healing modalities that you all are out there seeking, they're all just permission slips to heal, to change something within yourself. So whatever, whether it's your work or other, another practitioner, it's whatever resonates and wherever you can hear, oh, I'm allowed, I'm good enough, I can do this.
Yeah. And sometimes we might need other people to tell us that.
Yeah,
Sometimes we might need other people to even force us into that. Um, you know, Self esteem and worthiness are often much later developments for people. It's often just out of pain and desperation that we're brought to try anything
yeah,
to feel better. And then ultimately, I mean, it comes different for different people, right? But
yeah. Well, what do they say? Like you're either the pain of staying where you are becomes greater than the pain of trying something new. The
yes,
fear
yes, yes, yes. The fear of
doesn't
staying
have
where I am.
doesn't have to be that way, but very often it works that way.
It doesn't have to, but the unknown to shift perspective from the unknown being a terrifying, dark place where we only see the worst case scenario into a place of creativity and possibility,
Yeah.
co-creativity. That's a shift of what some might call faith. I'm not really a big faith person. Again, I'm a show me the money person, but um and we can get back to the unseen scale of consciousness from, do I view the world from a place of shame and guilt, or from a place of fear and anxiety and depression,
Right.
or a place of anger and judgment? Or do I view the world from a place of self responsibility and acceptance, or love and joy, or peace and unity? I mean, those are all worldviews of
Yep.
glasses that we can see any circumstance. And I'll just refer back because we mentioned it earlier. And there's a lot of, Abraham Hicks has a scale, Frederick Dodson has a scale, David Hawk. They all kind of point to this idea, different models, but the idea that we can incrementally elevate our perspective, our consciousness, and it changes our, not just our experience, but our reality.
A reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
back to this again, I was bringing it back to the body. You can often do that mentally. You think you're
Yes.
doing it mentally, and you are, but it takes the body. I had a wonderful practitioner out west share this with me years ago when I was stuck. The body is the densest piece. It's the densest thing, and it takes time to acclimate. It takes time to come along as people have realizations, as they clear things out of their consciousness, as they discover that you can actually say these things out loud. The body may still hold fear, and so whatever you can do to support your body and your nervous system through whatever work you choose, do it.
Yes. Absolutely. The common thing now is they say our issues are in our tissues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
And there's often more in there than even what the intellect wants to acknowledge. And that's, well, again, there's a feedback loop and it's
Right.
unique to each person,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah. So
caring for
you,
the
so
whole physical, mental, spiritual, emotional unit is that's the care, right? Caring, being willing to care for ourselves is the huge turning point. I think that word is a beautiful word for me, care.
yeah, and it's this concept you hear a lot about, self love, and it really comes down to that, loving yourself. And we didn't get a manual. We generally in society we're not taught that. We're taught to look out elsewhere. But it comes down to, you know it's telling yourself you love it, caring for it, taking baths, going for walks, whatever it looks like that.
Well, so there's an interesting thing, I think I kind of see this perspective that you're talking about of where we are challenged and where each of us grow, and there is a uniqueness to it, and I kind of see it as a triangle. And again, it comes through, it's very biblical today. So it comes through the golden rule, or I think it's called, it's beyond the golden rule, that to love God, to love others, and to love yourself. So love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul, and love others as you love the self, I think is the
Mhm,
one of the
mhm.
translations of that, right? So that triangle of God, self, others, most people have places where they're highly developed on that and comfortable with it, and places where they're not. And it's different for different people. If you're a narcissistic person, there's a total focus on the self and an realization of the other, an ability to see the other or to see God, right? And for the uber fundamentalist religion person, everything's about God. And you'll see a lot of self abuse and
Mm,
perhaps
mhm.
even abuse of others in service of this idea of the ultimate God. Right. And then there's people, and I know this was certainly, and many healers experience this, that very other focused at the
Yeah,
expense of myself, and not really a lot of trust in God because everything's human, right?
yeah,
And so the growth optimally is in those areas that we have deficit. And so, and the last one for me has been to care for myself. And that's fine. Actually, it was through the willingness to care about others and a kind of a natural leaning toward, I mean, I experienced spirit through nature.
mhm,
Um, so it was a natural leaning and the experience of connection and relief and wisdom that I find in the natural world. Those grew very naturally for me. And that was where the other piece, like again, wherever the suffering is, that will be the next place to grow. Um, so it was a long road for me before I got to self love, just to say that. I
yeah,
used to
yeah.
actually even be a little bit averse to that. But being
Same.
willing to
Yeah,
love
yeah,
anybody in that triangle will get you started.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so what advice would you give to somebody who's stuck? They're stuck in a job and a relationship and an addiction. They're stuck in life. Where to begin?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So the two things that I would say is look at what hurts. Look at what hurts. And if you're numb, well, so if you are identifying yourself as stuck, there's some dis-ease happening,
Mhm,
right? Even if it's in the numbness, if it's in the lack of what's happening, because often what's not happening in life can be as devastating as what is happening. You don't have to have, I mean, I'm kind of a dramatic person. So I was like, guns and police and like, blah. Like it was a little violent and crazy for me. It wasn't a lot of guns, but there was a few hanging around. So, like that, but I kind of like that. That's my cowboy thing, right? But I have also experienced, and we mentioned it, like being a prisoner of a privileged life, of having two kids, two dogs, two houses, two cars, two of fucking everything. I just got back from Europe and I wanted to die.
mm,
And it was like, well, what's that about? And it's
mm,
because there were things that weren't happening. It was what was not, what I wasn't engaging in, what I wasn't experiencing, what I was under being in my own life. So to be willing to look within yourself, to really, it starts with a willingness to become unstuck. Because if I'm stuck, I have my feet dug into the ground, even if I don't know it. And I mean, this is a hard question, but what am I unwilling to let go of? Would be the very first question. And probably the very first things that come up for you. I'm not saying they have to go away, but you might be required to let go and loosen your grip on those and look at it. So if it's your marriage or your job or your kids or the way you look or the way you relate with money or your relationship with drugs and alcohol, um, mm, the thing that you most think you don't want to give up, the bad news is I would encourage you to at least try to become willing to loosen it up. um Again, that cycle of we hold things in place and we feel victimized, like why am I stuck? And we actually, if we're in a cage, we always have the keys.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think that, and there's so much amazing work available. It is infinite. And um, ask the universe for help. Ask God for help. Ask your own higher self for help.
absolutely.
Whatever. Ask for wisdom. Ask for things to be obvious. Ask for help.
It,
because
and expect it.
we and
And expect
expect
it.
it and
And
pay
expect
attention to what comes,
it.
because this is an interactive universe, and we erroneously think we have to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And if you actually think about that, it's impossible to do that.
Yeah. Right.
So being willing and open to something different. That's the requirement. Like if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, you're going to get the same thing. I have to be willing to go to have things be different if I want things to be different. It
Yeah.
it's kind of a
Sounds
loop, but it's
sounds
a truism.
tautological, but yeah,
Right,
right.
right, right. And nothing changes if nothing changes. So I
Yeah.
have to be willing
What's
to
yeah, what's
have
what's
to
the
be
sound of one hand clapping?
exactly. So I have to be willing for things actually to change. That's the essence that starts the fire, is a
Mm,
willingness.
sure.
How that unfolds, again, there's so many people. I mean, my work is wonderful. You're going to introduce people into all these other really brilliant practitioners, many of which I've had the opportunity to meet through you, of all these different keys for
Yeah,
the lock. Yeah.
right.
But
Or permission slips.
it starts with really honesty with ourselves and willingness to just look. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Renee, so much. I'm gonna have wherever I put the links and all of this kind of thing, they will be there to find you and your work. That's been so helpful in my life. I've really enjoyed our relationship, and I respect you a great deal. And thank you for being here today.
Matt, it's a privilege to be part of your process, and many blessings on this work that you have experienced and are going to bring out to others. I'm just so excited. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Till next time.